David Harris, o CEO do American Jewish Committee, é originário de uma família judaica de Moscovo e, durante uma breve passagem por Lisboa, contou como, durante a Segunda Guerra Mundial, o nosso país foi parte essencial da história da sua família.
My family history did not begin in Portugal, and it did not end in Portugal. But without Portugal, I wouldn't be here today.
Uma história que começa em Moscovo, nos anos 20 do século passado, com Stalin a liderar a revolução.
My mother, my uncle, and their parents, my maternal grandparents, were among the very last Jews to be able to leave the Soviet Union under Stalin's rule. That was in 1929. They moved to Paris, where they lived quite happily for the next 11 years, until May 1940. That's when Nazi Germany launched its invasion against Belgium, the Netherlands, and France. And despite the much vaunted Maginot Line, the French defense was weak, and it wasn't long before Nazi Germany took over Paris, where my family lived. And Nazi Germany was joined by French Vichy collaborators, and together they began looking for the Jews. So my family, like many other Jews and non-Jews in France, began fleeing south, looking to hide from the Nazis and eventually to find a path to freedom. It wasn't easy. They spent nearly 17 months hiding, fleeing, fearing, escaping. And there was a conundrum. They wanted desperately to get a visa to the United States or to any country, but especially the United States. But they couldn't get a visa to the United States unless they could also show transit visas through Spain and Portugal that would allow them to leave for the United States.
Portugal e Espanha, por sua vez, recebiam os refugiados apenas se eles possuíssem vistos para poderem sair. Não se pretendia a permanência de refugiados nestes países.
So they were caught in this trap. Which would come first? The transit visas or the American visa? Eventually, thanks to the help of an American member of Congress, 14 visas were issued from the United States for the members of my family, including my mother, my uncle, my grandparents. And with those 14 visas, they were able to cross from France, across the Pyrenees to Spain, and then from Spain to come here, to Portugal.
A família deve ter entrado por Vilar Formoso como milhares de outros refugiados que fugiam dos nazis, uns de automóvel, outros de comboio. No local existe agora um museu que evoca esses dias de aflição e esperança.
They didn't come as sightseers, they didn't visit all the beautiful spots in Lisbon, nor did they come here to spend time thinking about the history of Jews in Portugal, which is a complicated history. They came here because for them, this was the stepping stone from Lisbon across the ocean to the United States, to freedom and to separation from Europe. And their story is the story of many, both Jews and non-Jews. And for those who have seen the legendary film Casablanca, starring Humphrey Bogart, it all revolves around who could get visas even from Casablanca to come specifically to Lisbon in order to go from Lisbon then to the United States. My family was cared for here by Jewish organizations until they were able to board a ship, the SS Exeter, from the American Express lines, somewhere at the end of October or the first days of November of 1941.
Em Lisboa, a família dirigiu-se à Rua Brancamp, onde, no número 12, funcionavam os escritórios da organização judaica ISEM, que comparticipava às despesas dos vistos dos refugiados. E foi no Hospital Israelita, que pertencia ao Somer Noflim, a instituição solidária da comunidade israelita de Lisboa, que no próprio dia da partida tomaram as vacinas antes de embarcar.
And they crossed the Atlantic Ocean and they arrived in New York. And in New York, they found the distance from Europe, the distance from the Holocaust, the distance from traditional European anti-Semitism, and I was born as the first member of my extended family, born in the United States. My parents always shared with me certain lessons of life. One of the lessons was never to take freedom for granted. The second lesson was never to underestimate your enemy. When Adolf Hitler said he wanted to murder the Jews, not enough people took him seriously, but that was his intention, and he came close, including touching other members of my family. And the third thing that my parents told me was about Portugal. Maybe they lived in a kind of daze, maybe it was a dream, maybe it was a combination right here in Lisbon for the short time they were here. But every time that my mother spoke about Portugal, every time that she spoke about Lisbon, there was a change in her face. There was a sense of gratitude. There was a sense of appreciation. And there was always that additional thought my mother would add, and I can still smell the bread from the bakeries in the early morning. Because for her, the bread represented, if you will, the smell of freedom and safety. It wasn't just a culinary smell. She interpreted it somewhat differently, almost as the Jews do during Passover with the matzah. For her, the bread of Portugal represented her safety from 17 months of fearing arrest, watching other French Jews, both native and foreign-born, being deported through Drancy to the Nazi death camps, including my cousin Mila Racine. So, growing up, long before I ever visited Portugal for the first time, this was a very special country in my family's life. And I'm proud that the Portuguese Jewish community today is alive and vibrant and has ambitious plans to build a museum, which appropriately they're calling tikva, the Hebrew word for hope. And if my mother were alive today and she were asked about Portugal, she would say Portugal to her represented tikva, hope.